you guys are having a great con today. We're going to have a really fun panel. I'm going to start by introducing our authors, and then we'll get down onto all the nitty-gritty on romantasy and why it's such a fun genre to be working in right now. First, we have Alexandria Bellefleur, is a best-selling and award-winning author of swingy romances, often featuring lovable grumps and sunshine characters who bring them to their knees. A Pacific Northwesterner at heart, Alexandria now lives in New York City with her cats Mills and Boone. Her debut novel, Written in the Stars, was a 2021 Lambda Literary Award winner and 2020 recipient of the Ripped Bodice Awards for Excellence in Romantic Fiction. Emily Krempholtz is not a supervillain, nor has she ever served as minion to one. She lives in Colorado, where she does not have an evil lair hidden deep in the Rockies. I don't believe any of this. And baked goods that she loves to make that are definitely not poisoned. She is a best-selling ghostwriter, editor, and book coach. Miranda Mundt is a Seattle area-based graphic novelist known for their webcomic Muted and for co-founding Lovebot with their wife, fellow artist Chase Keels. Mundt studied 2D animation at Vancouver Film School and has also worked extensively as a freelance illustrator, layout designer, and graphic designer. And Purpah is an artist and writer based in California. They earned a BFA in illustration and have since gone on to create Suitor Armor on Webtoon, as well as working on other projects. And I feel really weird talking about myself in third person. So I'm the #1 New York Times best-selling author of House of Salt and Sorrows and The 13th Child. After getting my BFA in theater design and production at the University of Michigan, I stage managed tragic operas filled with hunchbacks, seances, and murderous clowns, and then I decided I wanted to write books that were just as spooky. I live in West Michigan with my husband and daughter. All right, so we're just gonna get straight into it. Like, romantasy is having a moment. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. But like, I feel like everywhere we go, it's romantasy this, romantasy that. I saw a romantasy middle grade book the other day, and I was like, I feel like we've taken this too far. Before we dive too much into the all of the fun stuff on why and how of romantasy, can you guys go down the line and give your best elevator pitch for your books?
I can try.
Which all embody romantasy so very well.
Yes. My Muted is a queer and witchy graphic novel following Camille Severin in some Louisiana swamps where she discovers locked up traumatic memories and discovers her identity both magically and, you know, the fact that she's attracted to girls also helps. Yeah.
Suitor Armor is about a fairy in hiding amongst humans named Lucia, and she is lady-in-waiting to the future human queen. And when arriving at the castle, she meets and falls in love with an enchanted suit of armor named Modius. And political intrigue and trauma and a bunch of really good stuff happens.
Violet Thistlewaite is not a villain anymore. It tells the story of Violet Thistlewaite, who is a very powerful plant witch who spent her life working for an evil supervillain until he is defeated and she decides to turn over a new leaf and open a flower shop in a small town, much to the chagrin of the grumpy alchemist who lives next door.
So The Devil She Knows is a paranormal romance, not quite romantasy, so I guess I'm kind of the odd one out. So it follows a down-on-her-luck pastry chef who makes a deal with a very crafty demon to win her ex back after a proposal gone awry. But she soon discovers that the woman of her dreams might actually be the devil she knows.
My adult debut, A Land So Wide, is a loose retelling of the Scottish ballad of Tamlin. It's set in the heart of the Canadian wilderness and follows a mapmaker Greer who is stuck in a town circled by warding stones, and she is unable to break through. And if you stay overnight in the town for one sunset, you're stuck there forever. And she's a mapmaker and wants to go out and explore the world and all of the terrifying creatures that live in the woods. Her story kind of really takes off when the night that she's supposed to marry her childhood sweetheart Ellis, he walks past the warding stones after sunset and is followed by a really awful monstrous creature, and she has to go figure out how to break the stones and then go after him in into the heart of the wilderness. Alright, so the thing that I love about romantasy, like it's fantasy, right? Like we all are, we're fantasy writers at heart. But we do have like a lot of really fun tropes and subplots and everything with the romance. When you guys are starting out and like creating all of the worlds and everything within your book, do you start with the world building first? Do you start with characters? Is there like the romance? Does that take the theme for you guys? Like where do you start out with your book? Anyone?
For me personally, I usually start with the characters because they're so, like a central point for me, and it's just, in my process, it's easiest to start off with the characters and work outwards from them. I've never been much of a world builder, so it helps me to focus on the characters and then let them inform the world around them, and I'm like, okay, what blockades do I need for them? What challenges do I want to introduce? And then the world is kind of built out from them as I want to decide like how they change throughout the story and what the world needs to look like in order to inform those changes.
I think for me it really varies from book to book, but I like to start with a concept. For Violet, it was very much like a former villain wants to start over. Who is that kind of person? And then it moves into character from there. It moves into theme and what do I want them to discover about themselves and about the world and about their lives throughout this story. But for me, it definitely starts with kind of that fantastical concept, and then I think about who realistically would live in that world.
For me, it also depends. I do think with Munich it was very much character forward, but like the lore, like the magical source was actually like my wife and I had this like world that we developed from like 8th grade, which is like too broad of a concept, and I was like, how can we channel like this sort of thing into just like something a bit more modern? And so it started with the character designs and a lot of Pinterest boards and like building out all the different families and their factions and going from there, and then realizing, oh, these two kind of look cute together.
So for me, normally I start with the kernel of an idea. With The Devil She Knows, it's bedazzled, but make it sapphic. But then I go back to characters, and this is my first paranormal. I've been writing contemporary, so I'm always very thinking internally, what do the characters want? What do they need? What's standing in their way? And then expanding it with the fantasy elements, what's standing in their way was the world. The stakes are elevated, but it's always going back to what do they need? What do they want? What are their false beliefs and their fears? And just building out from there.
That is so fascinating. I always start with my world building. I love building out, like figuring out what the kind of the mood of everything is going to look like, and then start putting limitations on it. And so, since most of my books are fantasy, like 1800s and on, I start immediately like, I don't have electricity, I don't have running water, or do I? Because I want to have a bathtub scene. Magic, it's so much fun. But I like going through and like putting all the limitations in, and then I always start with like a Pinterest board as kind of like the big touchstone thing that I can go back to. So like when I get into like the middle of I always call it the soggy middle of the draft, I'm like just ruining the fact that I ever had this idea for this book. I can go back and be like, oh wait, remember when it was pretty and it was just these like happy images that made you really excited to write about it? And I go back to that, and then once I kind of have like everything fleshed out and I make like tons of maps and like really bad doodles of everything, then I can kind of go in and like, what character am I putting in? Like what's her desires, what's her wants, all of these things, and then the story usually kind of comes to me after that because it's like the world is so fresh in my mind. So one of the fun things with romantasy, we have like all of these really great tropes that we take from romance novels and things. We've got like the forced proximity, enemies to lovers, my favorite, one bed. Do you think that the nature of the tropes change at all for you guys when you're writing in like a fantastical world? It's kind of fun. You can have only one dragon instead of only one bed. Does that change the way that you kind of go through and like all these romantic tropes that we know and love?
Absolutely. Like, that's the fun part. I mean, like, there's only one greenhouse is, very much a big part of what I've been joking about with my book. It's fun to take expectations that you have that readers have and kind of turn them on their head and give them your own, fun little flair. And I think, that can be said for most genres, but I think it's just more fun when there's magic involved.
I think it allows for some really fun spins on different tropes. One of my favorite tropes is ones that prevent physical touch. I grew up watching Pushing Daisies, which if you haven't seen, is like this man can bring people back to life by touching them, but if he touches them again, they return to death, and he brings back the woman that he loves, but the caveat being they can never touch again or else she'll die. And in my case, her love interest being a metal suit of armor, when people ask me like, well, how do they do it? And I'm like, well, they don't. So it becomes more about like their emotional connection and stuff. So, that was the fun I got to have with it. It was like he's an enchanted suit of armor, and that's basically the same trope, but with just, magic adds a different flavor to it, which is like a ton of fun. So.
I don't have a very good answer for this one. But it's, for me, it's a lot of, I guess it's sort of an outlier where, admittedly, the romance part is a big part of Muted, but like a secondary part to like Camille's overall journey, and so it's a lot of it is just her basically being the grumpy one, and then having two very lovely sunshine ladies trying to help open up the world for her, and seeing just like the different dynamics between two different people and how they all kind of interact with each other is fun.
I've had a lot of fun with tropes in writing The Devil She Knows. I feel like they're magnified. Instead of only one bed, it's only one elevator, and the elevator, can change locations. Like it's like a little bottle, like genie bottle. I dream of Genie. And then enemies to lovers, I feel like thrives in romantasy. I feel like in contemporary, you have rivals to lovers or antagonists to lovers. But when you add the fantasy component, you can have that dagger against someone's throat, the claws against someone's throat that you can't really have in contemporary, or else that crosses a line unless you're writing dark romance. So that's been fun to play with.
Where do you guys see the line between fantasy with romance and true romantasy? Because there's definitely like, there's a soft shit. It's not like a hard balance, but like I feel like when we see romantasy, we know it, but like we don't necessarily like. I feel like there's so many other fantasy books that also could be considered romantasy. But do you guys like think through like how hard you want to push the romance plot versus like fantasy? Things are happening
I
out here.
consider myself a romance writer first and foremost, so I'm always thinking about the central romance. So the fantasy elements serve the romance instead of the romance serving the fantasy. I feel like whatever modifier you have in front, so like fantasy romance, it would be like historical romance, contemporary romance, but the romance is the A plot. Whereas with like fantasy with romantic elements, the fantasy is the A plot, the romance is serving the fantasy. Romantasy, I feel like, is a marketing term, and it kind of muddies the waters. You have fantasy with romantic elements and romance with fantasy elements. So I think that kind of has messed things up for our understanding. That's my take on it.
No, I agree with that.
And
I really that was a perfect statement.
I think there's a kind of freedom to that squishiness too, because it means that you can kind of adjust your language based on who you're talking to. Because I think, we're all in here because we like romantasy, presumably. But so I think we're also all aware that there is somewhat of a stigma around the term too. And when you're talking to somebody who you're like, I know you would like this book, I know you would really love this story, but I know the term romantasy is gonna turn you off. You get to like adjust your language a little bit and be like, it's a fantasy with romance. And they're like, oh, I've never heard of such a thing. And so you can kind of, pick and choose a little bit, but I definitely agree, with what Erin said. You know it when you see it.
Yeah.
I think it's like, it's the same recipe with just like, did you want to add more cinnamon into it than others? And, so like, do you prefer writing fantasy with some romance, or do you prefer like romance with some fantasy? Like me personally, I consider myself more of a fantasy writer, because while there is like a prevalent romance, like the story evolved into so much more where it's not just about their relationship. But I think like both are fine, and like it's just like two sides of the same coin, and the coin still has the same value. It's just, you know, it's whatever side you want to be on, like when you're consuming or when you're writing and stuff. But yeah, I do think like putting labels on things and like people will associate it and stuff. But no, I think it's like they're both really great. It's just like matter of preference.
Absolutely. I was at a book signing last weekend, and a guy came up and did not look like my traditional, typical reader. And he was like, "What is this book about?" And I was like, "I'm going to say romantasy and like turn you off instantly." I was like, "It's an adventure novel." They go off and there's like these horrible things that fall from the sky and all of the stuff. And he was like so sold. And I was like, and she's following her childhood sweetheart. He's like, "Oh, you had to ruin it with the romance." I was like, "No, I had you. You were so excited about this until then." But I do like there's some kind of like many smatterings of ways you can kind of tell. There's something for everybody's taste. So we're at Comic-Con. We all love fandoms, and we fan hard. Romantasy readers, I feel, are especially passionate with the ships and the insta-tropes and like all of the stuff on TikTok. I'm amazed with all the fan art and videos and stuff that get made. What is the wildest or most delightful fan experience that you guys have had as authors? I'll start. I have someone with a tattoo of a quote from one of my books, which was just wild. I was like, oh my gosh, and she wanted it in my handwriting. She asked me to like put it in the thing, and I was like, this is weird. I felt very like on pressure to like perfectly write out all the loops and everything. But that was insane to me. Someone wanted to tattoo my words on themselves.
That's awesome. Yeah, when I was growing up, you know, I've been, you know, cosplaying since like 2009. And so like, you know, cosplaying various different fandoms. And like, so growing up, I was like, I think it'd be really cool like one day if someone like would want to dress up as someone that I wrote. And then so the first time I saw Camille cosplay, I was like, I did it, I made it. And then I was seeing cosplays of the plant demon in here, Dendro. She's like all green with like petal hair, which is a complex design, but people were cosplaying her, and I was like, I really did it. Yeah.
I think for me, I mean, seeing people cosplay, you know, your characters is a big one, but I think the thing for me that was amazing was, and this was like an online interaction rather than in person, but because I grew up like making my own self-inserts for things and I draw like my own characters, I think the first time I saw someone draw like their own OC for Suitor Armor, and I was just like, you actually want to be in my world? Are you okay? But that was just like a really like full circle moment, because I went from like, you know, and I think when I saw like the first fan fiction for Suitor Armor on AO3, and I was just like, I've come full circle from high school.
I'm very much still a baby author. My debut comes out next month.
I've had some tattoos shown to me from fans, and that's in the contemporary world. So romance readers, not just fantasy readers, are also really avid and diehard. So for my first book, Written in the Stars, I've had some cilantro tattoos. It's very poignant for the characters. Some cosplaying of a few of my characters, and yeah, some fanfic. That one touched me the most because I got my start writing fanfic. So seeing that on AO3, I haven't read it. I don't want to like, you know, cross those lines, but it was really meaningful because, you know, I think back to writing AO3, you know, stories like, you know, uploading them in the middle of the night, and yeah.
This is a question for romantasy, romance, traditional, everything. How do you think social media, especially book talk, and like I know we started out kind of the bookstagrammers, now we're into the book talk stuff. How do you think that the uprise in social media influencers in the book community has influenced like what types of books are being written, what books are getting pulled off of like Wattpad and stuff and made into books, and getting like more hype and everything? What has kind of spurred that? Do you guys think?
What spurred it? I admittedly am on the fringes. I feel like every time I post, I feel like every time I'm trying to break into book talk and I haven't figured out how, because I tag on the post and I'm like, do you like this? But like, I feel like I know it's not the whole of it, But I do feel like when I hear about book talk, it's mostly like people rating things based on how like spicy it is. So maybe I need to dig into that. But I feel like that's because, people are very intrigued and titillated, if you will, by that sort of thing. So
I think it's, the internet and social media has just allowed the gap to close for people to share and enjoy things together. Because I remember one of the best experiences I had with a book was in high school when like Twilight first came out. And even though I'm not like, I wasn't a mega fan, it was like going to school every day and like, what chapter are you on, with your friends and stuff. And social media and book talk and YouTube has just like closed the gap. So like you can be like, I want to know what people think about this book I really like, so you can get other people's opinions. And I think it's just a way that people come together and share books they either liked or didn't like, and just like to connect over books. And because it's a lot harder these days to like find people who are reading the same things as you, unless like you go out looking for a book club or whatnot. But it's just a fantastic way that you can find people who are interested in the same kind of books as you.
Totally agree. I think social media is fantastic for community. You're able to find people who like the same things as you, who are, like you said, passionate about all those same things, and that's fantastic. I also think that it's really cool because for a lot of people, romantasy is a gateway drug. Like, I mean, like, how many of your friends have you talked to where they're like, I haven't read a book for pleasure since high school or whatever, and you're like, okay, so like pick up ACOTAR, and then like, like it is the gateway drug for people. They read it, they love it, and they think, wait, what else is out there? And because of social media, because of the way that we talk about books on social media, we're able to look into tropes. We're able to say, oh, so you like that? You'll probably like this. And if you like that, you'll probably like this. And if you like that, you'll probably like this, and so on and so forth. And it allows people to really dig down into what they are enjoying about a book and find more about it. And that's awesome. Like, I love that social media helps introduce people to reading in such a new and exciting way.
I agree with what everyone else has said. I also think that it's been a real boon to the romance genre beforehand. Like in indie bookstores, you'd see one little shelf shoved into the back near the bathroom, shadowy. You'd ask, do you have a romance section? And they were like, yeah. It's like, around the corner, down the hall, in the basement. Now it's, huge because they're bestsellers. It's driving the market. So it's kind of the antithesis of cringe. Everyone's like, oh, that's so cringe, but loving something and being passionate about it is cool now. And I think that's a great thing.
Absolutely. And I really love how you get to know, I follow a bunch of book influencers, and like having people who go out and I feel like many of them are like specifically curated, especially for me. And like finding do you want like a folk horror thing with like a weird cult influence and like a thing that feels like this? And I'm like, oh, yes, I do. And it's such a great way to get introduced to books like you wouldn't have heard of, and like even people who like us are in the industry who are hearing about books constantly. There's still so many books out there, and I love that it can take like these books that might have languished in obscurity and suddenly it just blows them up, and it's just amazing. All right, we have so many fans here. I know you guys have tons of questions. We are gonna do a quick, fun lightning round, and then we'll open it up to audience participation. Unfortunately, we do not have any wireless mics, so you guys will need to shout. What is your favorite trope and one that you would banish forever?
Okay, the first one's easy. Like I said, I like it when there's a reason why they can't touch or have traditional intimacy. There's like a barrier preventing it, or to prolong the longing. One that I would banish forever. Can I come back to that?
My favorite is definitely the opposite. I like forced proximity. I like a reason for them to have to be in the same space together and be like, no, you can't get out of there. This is fun. Shenanigans ensue. As for one that I would banish forever, I feel like I'm very much like a never say never person, but I tend to gravitate away from surprise baby tropes a lot of times.
I'm a sucker for forced proximity or opposites attract, and then the sub-trope of that, sunshine grump. And then I'm a firm believer that any trope in the right hand can work. So I'm not gonna say never, but secret baby or accidental pregnancy. Those are, you know, orange flags for me. Unless I really trust an author.
I'm gonna second the whole banishing the baby thing. Fourth, I guess, as we've all said that. I think my favorite is like when they are the yearning of it all, like if they're like childhood friends or like they've been around each other for a long time, and they're like, oh, I like them, but I can't tell them that I like them type thing, and they both really like each other, but they just won't talk about it. And then when they finally collide, they're like, oh, all these feelings that they've been holding back forever. I like that.
I'm also seconding the accidental pregnancy. I also am not. This is probably going to get my like writer card removed. But the enemies to lovers just doesn't do anything for me. I don't know. I haven't found like the right one yet. But my favorite is I love reading horror books, and then I really love royal rom-coms. So like when the cute nerdy guy in the bookstore turns out to be a prince and he has to like take her away for reasons. I like that. What is the weirdest Google search that you have ever done for research? I know you've done that. I'll start. For A Land So Wide, I spent 4 hours of my life looking at bat on treadmill videos because I have creatures that are very bat-like, and I wanted to know if bats could walk on land, and they can. They also can run, and they run on treadmills, and there's scientists at someplace who are trying to determine, because of the way the bats run, it might help human meniscuses at some point. And I fell down this rabbit hole, and my husband was doing taxes that morning, and we came and like met each other at lunch, and he's like, finally figured out this tax code problem. It's this is so great. And he's like, what did you do? And I was like, watch bats on treadmills for 4 hours.
I think mine is more along the vein of like, how much blood can a person lose before they pass out or die?
Yeah, mine's kind of in the same vein. I look up a lot of research on like, what is it like to lose a limb? What is it like to lose eyes? If you're in a coma for an extended period of time, what are the side effects upon waking? And I know my FBI agent is like, what is going on?
Years ago, I went down like a 3-day long rabbit hole about cemetery management, and I learned all about a lot of very, very mundane detail. I had a character in like a book that I shelved that worked at a cemetery, and I learned a lot about just the nitty-gritty business of landscaping and how bodies are buried. So it was kind of cool.
I was gonna say, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
I need that info. God, I do a lot of research for each book, so of course my mind goes blank. I would say most recently I fell down the rabbit hole of Scottish hand fasting rites and how they helped join clans, especially Clan MacDonald and Clan MacLeod. So I have an absurd amount of knowledge about 16th century Scottish hand fasting.
That's awesome.
All right, if you guys could go on a dream date in any spot in any of your books, what would it be and why?
My world is at war right now. I don't know. I think it'd be fun to go on a date in the black market and see what weird stuff you could buy there. You know, for however much money was in my pocket at the time.
Muted is set in New Orleans, and I've been there, and I've been wanting to go back there ever since. And so I would very much want to go, basically there in general.
My book is set in a very like cozy small town, so I would absolutely just like want to go like on a weekend date and like go to like the market and then go to all the little shops and then go to the tavern and like, you know, have a fun little just long day date that just never seems to end.
The fantasy setting within The Devil She Knows is hell. So, I can't say that I'd want to go there, but a lot of it takes place in an elevator that kind of has this enchantment where it's much larger than a normal elevator and it's very cushy and nice, so I guess an elevator.
That's awesome.
In House of Roots and Ruin, there is this glorious underwater ballroom where a wedding proposal takes place. And other than the giant carp that come and attack the walls of glass, I would like to go there. If your protagonist had a dating profile, what would their tagline be?
Oh my god.
I feel like the love interest in my book, his dating profile would probably be something along the lines of like, I'm only here because my sister made me make this profile.
Yeah.
Like,
No, it's the same with Camille. It would only be because her cousin made her one and took all the pictures of her while she wasn't even looking. People were like, oh, you look so natural and candid in your photos. She's like, what?
I think Lucia, it would be something along the lines of like, don't message me, Rukon. My villain, by the way.
Gosh, my protagonist is a chef, so probably something about making you a really great meal, but the love interest being a demon, probably something to do with the tagline, going down.
I think careers would probably be just a small town girl living in a closed off world. All right, this is the one question guaranteed to strike fear in authors' hearts everywhere. What book is on your nightstand right now?
A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saft, which I absolutely adore. I totally recommend it. Yeah.
I just finished This Princess Kills Monsters by Rye Ehrman, which was so good.
It's so much fun.
I'm on deadline, so my reading is suffering, but I just finished Play Nice by Rachel Harrison, and it was amazing. Loved it so much.
Bad and also haven't been reading as much. I've mostly just been reading comics. So, what's the one? Probably yours. Suitor Armor.
I am wildly late to the party, but I finally picked up Stephanie Garber's Once Upon a Broken Heart series, and oh my gosh, it's so good. All right, we will open up to audience questions.
You mentioned before how social media influencers approaching you and so on and so forth. How is working with an influencer different than working with a traditional publicist? Do you have a preference if you've worked with both, or like what are the differences?
I've never, I usually do all my stuff through my publicity team, but I love book influencers. Like, I think I always try to make sure to give a shout out for them, especially when they take all the trouble to make like the pretty flat lays and all this stuff. I always like to share, repost, retweet, whatever social platform we're on at the time. I know there's like a lot of contracts and details and stuff that go into like working with influencers, but I haven't had a lot of experience with that.
I guess most of my experience is I don't get approached. It gets approached through the team, but being on like podcasts and stuff. Would you think if I was on so many podcasts recently, I'd be better at talking in public? But I'm not. And but that's been a fun little slice of my life going on.
I haven't worked with a ton of influencers, mostly because I'm like super isolated in my little basement office. But I have done like a couple of podcasts, like you said, and I think it's a very like organic, personable experience as opposed to like, you know, dealing with a publisher, which is definitely more professional and stuff. So it's nice to kind of get that one-on-one human interaction with an influencer who's just like doing this for the passion of it, you know. Not to say that publishers aren't either, but it's just like a very, you know, like personable experience.
Yeah, everything goes through my publicist and my publisher, but I love working with people who have podcasts. It's great. I feel like it's more of a conversation than a stiff like promo. It's not, you know, promo first, it's really conversation first.
Yeah, that.
When you guys are writing a death of a character in your series, whether it be a shelved series or a current project or possibly a future one, how do you decide who is going to die? I asked because yesterday I was speaking to Lainey Taylor, and she told me she didn't even know until the end of her book. So it made me really curious. How do you decide?
I think it depends on the, it can definitely, based on the consequences of the character's actions, on whether or not like, okay, would these decisions lead to a death? And if so, like, am I going to pull punches, or am I going to be like, well, you died, congratulations, you know? In some cases, I did not, and more often than not, a character will survive that I wasn't expecting, versus like, If you've read Suitor Armor, there's 2 elves, and one of them dies. And I had originally planned on killing off both, but as I was writing the female elf, something I was just like, no, she needs to stick around. I have more to her story that I want to tell. So it's very kind of informative of like the characters and their arcs and whether or not it feels organic and right to end it or to continue it, and if that would serve the story or harm it, or so it's a very kind of like organic process, at least for me, to kind of see like who's gonna live and who's gonna die.
I definitely have more cases of planning on killing someone and then realizing actually I still have use for you type thing or like that I just like them too much. But in this case, usually deaths, and especially like Camille's mom, like the story can only exist because of this death. Like if her mom didn't die, if her twin didn't die, then this story as it is simply wouldn't happen, because it's like a cornerstone of how the whole thing kind of gets set off. So that's kind of a major plot thing to decide.
With mine, I am a big plotter, so I always know the death. Like I write towards all of the deaths because I've got a very detailed chapter breakdown of everything. But like when I'm deciding, like, okay, we're gonna kill off, X number of people. It's just honestly whatever the story needs. Like I don't want to have it ever be gratuitous. I don't ever want it to be just to get the reader to cry. Although I do love when you guys cry. But there's a purpose for the death. It moves the story along. It helps the main character, find the inner resolve for something. And sometimes also just makes you cry.
Yeah, no, I think characters have a purpose. Every one of them is a vehicle for something in your story. And I generally know from the beginning what's going to happen there. Violet leans cozy, so spoilers, there's not, a whole lot of like doom and gloom and death and dying in it. But no, I think knowing the role that your character plays in the overarching story and knowing what their presence or absence does or does not do for the characters surrounding them is something that can kind of help make that decision for you. And sometimes they'll tell you when you're writing.
I've never killed a character before, and so now I'm thinking, oh gosh, I'm really remiss in that. Maybe it's next one, some secondary characters are gonna say, watch out.
Yes.
Do you ever draw inspiration from people in your life, like when you're writing about your characters, and do they know that they're the inspiration?
I was actually talking about this recently. You probably won't be able to see, but I'll hold it up anyway. But there's a character in here. Here she is. But this little girl with red hair, and my little sister was reading it, and she was like, "Is she?" And I was like, "Yeah, she's based on you when you were a little kid." And she's like, "Hey, because she's my favorite character." So that was nice. Because like I draw inspiration, but I never do it in a way that I want it to be like an homage to them, because the people that I love and people that are important to me. So like everything that I pull are like bits that that I like about them, and like so hopefully if the character does anything that's not nice, like that's not you, that's just that's the other thing. But yeah, I pull it off.
I definitely pull inspiration from people in my life and stuff, but no, like I will never tell them or point it out, just because like it's not based on them. Yeah. But I don't want people to feel like, oh, if I act this way around you, you're gonna put it in your next story. Yeah. It's just like, no, it's just as a writer, that's natural to do, and I think as long as you're not putting, like your actual father and looks exactly like him, just like, I have daddy issues and here's a story about it. It's like, you're a dad for your birthday. It's like, I think it's a very natural thing to do, and but I don't go informing people of like, this was inspired by what you did or this interaction or whatnot, but because it's just part of being a writer.
Yeah, definitely. Like all of our life, I don't think you can write a book without your life experiences coloring the story that you are telling. It's always going to be there as something in the background, as part of your inspiration and as part of the kind of the flavor of your books. That's what makes your stories unique. That's what makes your books unique from someone else who could be trying to tell the same exact story. But yes, agree. I generally don't go around like with like a little notepad, like mining my friendships for content, because that's like kind of weird, and then I don't think they'd want to be my friends anymore. So.
Yeah, it's small little things. There's a Tumblr post that's around that's like, I learned like these great things that they like took away from different relationships and friendships. So like I like learned to love this food from my high school friend. It goes on and on. And so I feel like when I put things into my book, it's maybe more like little tiny things, more about how somebody made me feel than like them themselves, and that influences characters and the relationships between them.
I love that. I accidentally actually stuck a friend in a book and not realizing the name. If you've read House of Salt and Sorrows, there's the watchmaker, Ed Morris, who I went to college with, and I named him Edgar in the book, and I was just like, oh, Morris in my head, and it wasn't until I was in first class pages and I saw the name broken up and it said Ed Morris, and I was like, no. And so I let him know, and I was like, so I accidentally wrote you into my first book, and he was like, oh, such a noble character, do I have like really good like ending? And I was like, yeah, about that.
The main antagonist, or one of the main antagonists in this, is sort of, well, Camille's aunt, but another character is mom, and she's a bad mom. And like a cornerstone kind of thing was taken from one thing my mom said one time, and it's like, but like overall, they're not at all similar, but like at a signing that I had to do, my mom was in the audience, and and my friend was like, why didn't you talk about like all the mom stuff? And I was like, because my mom's gonna think that it's gonna be something, even though it's not. I don't want to have that conversation with her.
Wait, in the back.
So all authors put parts of themselves in their writing, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. Whether it's love scenes or conflict or action, which do you find the most revealing about yourself?
I think the biggest like moment that I ever like put of my life into a book was with 13th Child. It's a goddaughter of death. And it's the scope of her whole life, and so at the end with the epilogue we see the completion of it, and it was so gratifying to me as I was writing it, because my grandmother had just entered hospice, and it was the first time in my life that I had ever watched someone actively prepare to die. I witnessed, heart attacks and car wrecks and like those kind of things, but like someone preparing for that final moment, and like getting to talk with her about like, she knew she was going to go to heaven, she was going to see my grandfather again, like all the things that she knew, but she was like, I want to know what happens the second after, like what happens in that moment after I'm gone, and then what? And so when I was writing that book, like that's the most I've ever stuck of myself into a book, and to this day I cannot get through the epilogue, even in copy edits where they're like, you don't know how to use commas, and I'm like, I don't, it's just true. But it was so just gut-wrenching to read it every time, but it was also so ultimately hopeful.
For me, Camille has a lot of mental health issues, as a lot of us do, as I do. But like originally in the draft of her character, she was a lot more just like, even more like sullen and withdrawn and sad, and but like not really making any jokes. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, I'm like that, but I still laugh and make jokes sometimes. So her character was informed a lot by just the realization, just like, even if you're smiling and laughing and stuff, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're feeling all that great. So there were some moments and conversations that she had that were informed by my own mental health experience.
For me, there's definitely a lot of me in Lucia, and I didn't realize how much stuff I was working through until I went back and I was just like, whoa. I think there is a moment that I wrote for Lucia where she finds out a truth about the fairies and the elves, and she goes back and a ball is happening and she's required to go, and there's a line that she says to Modius where she says, everything has changed for me, but nothing has changed for them, and I can't talk about it. And that moment was very much informed when I was back in college, and I am bisexual, which is not something that's like, you can't see it, you can't, unless I talk about it, it's not something that you would know about me. And back in college when the Pulse shooting happened, I was very, very upset that I was not in an environment that would let me say out loud that I was bi, or that I was upset about this without people asking me questions or things getting very choppy. So it was that feeling of, everything has changed for me, I'm upset, but everything is fine for them. I'm going out the next day and the world has not changed for anyone else. And it just was like So that moment was very, I put myself a lot into that. So there's other moments like that, but Lucia's journey throughout the story is a very personable one.
I think in general, I tend to see a lot of myself in the themes of the work that I write. I think it's really difficult to write, 100,000 words, circling around some kind of central theme, central concept, and not believe not believe the message of the book. So there's definitely a lot there that I think I find myself in when I look back at Violet and kind of the conclusions that the book draws in terms of the nature of change and forgiveness and self-identity. I think the other thing, to make it a little bit more lighthearted is sense of humor. I don't think that you could read a book like Violet and be like, yeah, that lady was faking her love of wordplay and puns. That kind of stuff I feel like comes through the woodwork in everything I write. And yeah, so it's less experiences and I think more values and vibes. Yes.
Yeah, same. I think my humor comes through in all of my books. If you're like, oh wow, that character was really funny, thank you. It's the kind of shower conversations I have with myself, the little quips that I wish I would have said in the moment. I put those in my books. Otherwise, I kind of try to keep my characters, but maybe also their earnestness. I don't really tend to write very icy characters. My characters are they wear their heart on their sleeve. They feel things really big and boldly, and maybe that's myself magnified, what I wish I was a little bit more like, but inside.
Hi, I am uninitiated in the ways of romantasy. I didn't even know that Suitor Armor, which is the reason I came here today, was considered romantasy. So for someone who is just dipping her toes into things, do you have any recommendations for books? Any other authors that you'd like to
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Sorry, I'm going through my TBR right now. I think I could list off so many. I'm reading Alison Saft right now, which I think she's an amazing writer. I think that there's people cosplaying here from ACOTAR and Fourth Wing and everything. So I think it's really cool to start off with some of the bigger names that are going on right now. And there's also I can't remember what this website is called, is where if you type in books that you're already interested in, it will give you recommendations based off of the books you've already read. But oh my gosh, there's so many that I could list off, but if you have specifics.
I don't have the one. There's a high probability that if you know about webtoons that you might have already read it, but if you're looking in for goth lesbians in an undead Poe-related world, then Nevermore is one that you should read.
I'm reading also right now Melissa Lander's The Half King. It's really good. That was kind of my first really big foray into hard romantasy.
I think in general too, we were saying, romantasy is kind of a squishy term. So ask yourself, what are the things you really enjoy about books? What are tropes that you really like? What are some, kind of dynamics between characters that really get you into the book? And then find that website and search for it.
It's whatshouldireadnext.com. It's literally Yeah. They make it really simple.
I'll be going to that website.
Yeah.
I think we've got time for 2 more questions. Yeah.
What role, if any, has libraries and librarians played in your lives and your careers?
Everything. Oh my gosh, I love libraries. My mom would take us, I grew up in Texas, we had no air conditioning, we had no money, we were really broke back then, and we would go to the library and while away an afternoon, and I remember so vividly Miss Jane, our librarian, she handed me, because my mom was like, she has to stop reading fairy tales, this is past, she should be reading at a higher level, she reads at a high school level, why is she still going back to fairy tales? No. But I remember when Miss Jane handed me Robin McKinley's Beauty, and that rocked my world. And I was like, oh my gosh, here's the story I love of Beauty and the Beast, but it, like all of her inner thoughts, her agency, like all of this 300 pages of like, you know, instead of the little 10-page Charles Perrault thing, and like just changed my life.
Libraries were big for me because there was one really close to my junior high, so I basically walked there every day after school and just like sit in like the comic and manga aisle and just like sit there and like read for hours, which I would also do at Borders, but I could actually take them without buying them from the library.
They frown on that.
Yeah.
I was the kid that wouldn't go to recess. I would choose to stay inside and go to the library instead and either read books or write fan fiction longhand in my notebook. I think libraries provide such like a safe space to explore the literary world and lets you explore, and librarians became kind of like your cool aunt at school, you know, you feel like you could go in and be like, please give me like some book recommendations. Or I think like the biggest validation I got is when I would like read a book quickly and then turn it back in and she'd be like, you just check this out. I'm like, I know, I read it like overnight. And, you know, get that little bump of validation. Yeah.
It's twice.
I was very much that kid that was reading so much from a very young age, and a lot of it was like above my reading level, and librarians were the support system that I needed. I would go into my school library and they knew me, they knew my interests, they knew my reading level, and they were able to recommend books to me that they knew I would enjoy and that would keep me hooked on reading. I credit so much of the reader that I am today, of the writer that I am today, to the fact that I had librarians that supported my right to read, that supported, you know, my interests, and that kept encouraging me and kept talking to me about it. And I love librarians. I have so much respect for everything they do.
I pretty much grew up at my local library. My mom did all of the volunteer gardening, so during the summers I would just camp out in the library while she was outside. And now today I always wait with bated breath for like library journal like reviews, and my very first event back in 2020 was at PLA, and so that was like so special that I always think back, like meeting librarians from all around the country. And then even more so, all the books I write are queer, and so I feel like today, with banned books happening left and right, and librarians fighting so hard tooth and nail, front lines, to keep books in especially kids' hands, that just means a whole lot to me.
Any advice for new writers?
One thing I wish I had known earlier, I guess, in my career, I always just assumed that writing is like a very solitary thing, because you go, you think of the idea, you ponder it with the characters in your head for a while and everything, and then magically you find an editor and then the book is out. That was how books were made in my head. And I wish that it took me a while to find like critique partners and beta readers and like making friends in the community who were kind of like at that same stage of life that I was, and whatever literary pursuit was going on. It's just so nice. It's such a weird way to have a hobby, make a living, any of that, and so to have somebody who's like at that same level as you, like when you're in the query trenches, and like then when suddenly like you're in your debut year and like the world is upside down every other second, all of that, and now like further on, like, oh, do you want to read a blurb? Fine. Like you're back and forth. Like having those people who are kind of at that same level, it's such a community, and like I wish it had not taken me like 9 months to realize like critique partners are your friends, so you should make a bunch of them.
I agree that community is super important. I feel like the whole journey of making Webtoon would be possible if we hadn't been able to, a whole group of us talking to each other. And, but probably my only major advice is the same thing you'll probably hear from everyone, is that you just, at the end of the day, you have to do it. It can only stay in your head for so long. Like, if it's bad, then it ends up bad, and who cares? But the act of making it will tell your brain oh, I can make something. So that's maybe short stories first. You write a short story, oh, I did it, and get that little dopamine boost, and then keep that truck rolling.
I saw a quote that's kind of perfect for that, where it says make it exist, you can fix it up later. For me, I guess my advice is a little different, from a graphic novel artist and writer standpoint. I think my number one thing is like just start it, because if you're stuck in the planning phase forever, whether it be like the actual writing or in this case art, like your art and your writing is going to change over time anyway. Like even if you get to like a good starting point, it's going to change no matter what. And it's going to change for the better the more that you work on it. Like in my case, like I had started this on Webtoon Canvas, which is where anyone can post their comic work, and I had been doing it just as a side project while I was looking for work in animation, and no one was getting back to me. And then when Webtoon reached out to put it on originals, they were like, okay, you know, we need a synopsis of like the full story, you know. It's like I was like, I've been making this up episode by episode. I have no synopsis. I had to write it in like one night. And I think that because I just like busted it out and I didn't have time to overthink or go back over it 12 million times, because I think the worst thing you can do for a story is overwork it, like edit it to the point where it has no breathing room anymore and you've lost what made it, you know, special in the beginning. So I'd say just get started, trust yourself, because this is a story that you want to tell for a reason, and just have fun with it.
I would say a piece of advice that I try and tell myself and that I tell my clients as a book coach is there is no such thing as a wasted word. Every word you write is teaching you how to be a better writer. It is teaching you what you like to write. It is teaching you what you don't like to write. It is teaching you how to do better. So just write, like everyone's been saying, you know, just you gotta just do the thing. You can think about it forever, but you have to sit down and write at some point, and those words will help you. Even if you end up shelving that project, even if it ends up, that one takes you nowhere, even if you end up, you know, stripping it down and mining it for parts later on. Those words are valuable and they will help you grow as a writer.
Echoing what everyone else has said, also save those words. I always keep a scraps file for every project. So copy those, don't delete them forever. Put them in that other file. They might come in handy, but otherwise, yeah, there's no such thing as a wasted word. You can only fix words that you've written. I kind of think of it as like putting sand in a sandbox for your first draft, and then you can make sandcastles later. And then also, I always have a running list of things. Jennifer Lynn Barnes did a great talk at RWA a bunch of years ago about writing for your id. Look that up. Especially when you're at the middle of a draft, when you reach that soggy middle, start putting in things that like light you up inside, that you like gravitate to, whether it's like, I think twins are so cool, like identical twins. Figure out how to work that in. Like kind of play with your own mind to like game the system. Like make yourself excited. Yeah, it's great. It's so good.
Seriously, look that up.
Thank you guys so much for coming out. We are going to be doing a book signing over in the hall. I'm not quite sure what table we go to, but it's out there. Come find us. Thank you guys.